When the Founding Fathers created the United States, they had just escaped a system where one person, a king, held all the power. They knew they needed a government strong enough to rule, but not so strong that it could become a tyranny. Their solution was ingenious: to divide the power among three different groups. Think of it like a three-person team, where each person has a vital, unique job. That division of labor is what keeps our entire government stable and fair. So what are these three jobs? We have the legislative branch, whose main job is to make the laws. That's Congress. Then there's the executive branch, led by the president, whose job is to enforce or carry out those laws. And finally, the judicial branch, or the court system, which is there to interpret the laws and make sure they're constitutional. It's a simple idea, but it's the foundation of American governance. The idea of separation of powers means that each branch is independent and has its own separate list of duties. Imagine giving the power to write the school rules to one group of students, the power to enforce those rules to the teachers, and the power to decide if a rule was broken to the principal. No one person or group is allowed to do all three things. This intentional separation prevents any one branch from becoming too powerful or corrupt. Separation of powers isn't enough, though. The branches need a way to keep an eye on each other, and that's where checks and balances come in. Think of it like a three-way standoff, where everyone has a move they can use to stop the others. If the president signs an unfair law, Congress can investigate him. If Congress passes a terrible law, the president can veto it. This system ensures that every major decision has to pass through more than one set of hands, guaranteeing deliberation and accountability. Let's start with the legislative branch, or Congress. This is the lawmaking engine of the country, housed in the magnificent U.S. Capitol building. Its core function is to represent the will of the people by debating, writing, and voting on new laws. But they do much more. They also control all the money the government spends, which is often called the power of the purse, and they have the unique power to declare war. Congress is bicameral, which just means it's divided into two parts, the House of Representatives and the Senate. This two-part structure was one of the biggest compromises at the Constitutional Convention. The smaller states wanted equal power, while the larger states wanted power based on population. The solution was to give both. The Senate gives every state equal representation, and the House bases representation on population. The House of Representatives is considered the branch closest to the people. Because representation is based on population, states like California have many representatives, while smaller states have only one. Representatives only serve 2-year terms, which means they are constantly up for re-election and must stay very attentive to what the people in their districts want and need. The Senate is the cooler, more deliberate body. Every single state, no matter how big or small, gets 2 senators. Since their terms are 6 years, they are less pressured by immediate public opinion and can focus on long-term national interests. The Senate also has some exclusive powers, like having the final say on whether to approve treaties the president makes or high-level appointments he proposes. How does Congress check the president? In several big ways. The most dramatic is impeachment, where the House can bring charges against the president and the Senate holds the trial. More routinely, the Senate has to sign off on major treaties and the people the president appoints to lead departments. Congress also uses its oversight power to regularly investigate how the executive branch is spending money and enforcing laws. Congress can even check the judicial branch. The most direct way is that the Senate must approve all federal judges, including those on the Supreme Court. Furthermore, if a judge is abusing their power, Congress can impeach and remove them, just like they can with the president. This check ensures that the people who interpret the law are accountable to the people's representatives. Now let's move to the executive branch, which is primarily the president and the massive government apparatus under them. The president's job is not to write the law, but to execute it, to make sure it is actually carried out. For example, if Congress passes a law about clean air standards, it's the President's Environmental Protection Agency that writes the regulations and sends inspectors out to enforce it. The President is also the Commander-in-Chief of all our military forces. The President has several key roles that sound a bit like being a king, but are limited by the other branches. As Chief Diplomat, they meet with foreign leaders and negotiate treaties. As Chief Executive, they oversee the entire government bureaucracy. But the biggest check the President has is the power to veto or reject a bill passed by Congress. It's like a giant stop sign on the lawmaking process. The President's most famous check on the legislative branch is the veto. Imagine Congress passes a bill that the President thinks is a bad idea. They can officially reject it, and that bill won't become law unless Congress can rally a 2/3 majority in both houses to override the veto. This gives the President enormous power to block laws they disagree with, forcing Congress to compromise. The President's check on the judicial branch comes in the form of appointments. When a federal judge retires or passes away, the President nominates a replacement. Since Supreme Court justices serve for life, a president's appointments can shape the future of the court and its interpretation of the Constitution for decades. They also have the power to grant pardons, legally forgiving people convicted of federal crimes. Finally, we have the judicial branch, the court system. This branch is responsible for interpreting laws and applying them to specific disputes. The federal court system has different levels. The lowest are the district courts, where trials take place, then the courts of appeals, and finally, at the top of the pyramid, is the Supreme Court. The judicial branch is all about making sure justice is served and the law is followed. The Supreme Court is the ultimate legal authority in the country. It is composed of 9 justices who are appointed by the President and approved by the Senate. To ensure they are truly independent and not worried about re-election or political pressure, they are given lifelong tenure. This means they can make difficult, unpopular decisions based only on the Constitution and the law, not on what the public wants to hear. The judicial branch's biggest power is judicial review. This is the power to declare any law or executive action unconstitutional, essentially wiping it off the books. This power wasn't actually spelled out in the Constitution. It was established by the Supreme Court itself in the landmark 1803 case of Marbury versus Madison. Judicial review is the ultimate safeguard to ensure the government stays within the boundaries set by the Constitution. How does the Supreme Court check Congress? Through judicial review, of course. Congress can spend months debating and writing a complicated law. But if the Supreme Court rules that even one part of that law violates the Constitution, for example, by infringing on a citizen's freedom of speech, the court can strike down the entire law. This check forces Congress to be careful and mindful of constitutional limits when writing legislation. The judicial branch also directly checks the President. A president may issue an executive order to quickly enact a policy. But if someone sues, the Supreme Court can review that order. If the court finds that the President overstepped their authority or violated the Constitution while enforcing a law, they can declare the executive action illegal. This is a crucial line of defense against potential presidential overreach. Why should a system created over 200 years ago matter to you today? Because the 3 branches of government are the guarantee of your freedom. The system of checks and balances is what protects your ability to speak freely, practice your religion, and be treated fairly under the law. Understanding how Congress, the President, and the courts work is the foundation of being an informed citizen. It's your civic duty to know the rules of the game so you can play a part in shaping your own government.